Dandenong railway station was once a massive complex. In modern day, while a lot of the facilities have been removed and dismantled, it's still a complex junction, where the Gippsland Main Line and the Cranbourne form a South Gippsland Main Line junction. This video will be a little different to the other signalling diagrams I've made, as this video will cover Dandenong in 1979, when urban sprawl just reached Dandenong. So in today's video, I'll be explaining Dandneong Junction, the gateway to the southeast. Overview. This video will be explaining Dandenong in 1979, before rationalization took literally everything from Dandenong. Dandenong. Dandenong Station was opened on the 8th of October 1877 as one of the original stations built on the route. At this point, a line into the city hadn't been built yet, so the station and the Gippsland line was isolated until a direct line was opened in 1879. It wouldn't get super busy at the station until the South Gippsland Main Line was opened in 1892, where the South Gippsland Line junctioned at Dandenong, about 1.5 kilometers southeast of the station. Dandenong's name might have derived from the indigenous word meaning lofty mountains, probably referring to these things in the background of Dandenong, which also conveniently has this relatively unknown heritage railway, or the Woiwurrung word Dandenong, probably referring to the concrete creek to the south of the station. By the late 19th century, a third platform would have been added, and Dandenong's yard would have been built up rapidly. Today, Dandenong Station is made up of one island and one side platform, with the side platform being platform 3 and the island being platforms 1 and 2. Platform 1 usually carries up trains towards the city, platform 2 isn't used for through trades and is usually used for terminating trains, and platform 3 carries all down trains, although this isn't always the case, as all trackage through the station is bidirectional. In 1922, the electrification from Oakley was extended to Dandenong, which is where the electrification would end for the next 30 years. In 1954, as part of Operation Phoenix, the first mainline electrification to Warrigal was opened. While Dandenong has had a stockyard for many years, in 1958, the Dandenong stock markets were moved to Cheltenham Road, adjacent to the Stockyards. This meant the station yards received a few extensions to handle the extra traffic. In 1975, suburban services were extended from Dandenong to Pakenham. In 1993, the South Gippsland Line was unfortunately closed, with Dandenong losing its junction status after 100 years. However, fortunately, only after 2 years, the South Gippsland Line was reopened and electrified in 1995, but only as far as Cranbourne. The reopening of the Cranbourne line also coincided with the rebuilding of the station, which removed the Southern Aurora Hotel, timber weatherboard buildings, and the filling in of the underground pedestrian walkway. Today, Dandenong is only served by 3 types of trains: Velocities for the Traralgon line, and soon the Bairnsdale line, NSETs, which at the time of writing are being seized on the Bairnsdale line today, and HCMTs, which are the only member of the suburban fleet to go through the station. The station you see today is the 1995 building, which I think has aged relatively fine. In 1979, the time period we're actually talking about, and all country trains going through the station would have been loco-hauled. The suburban trains going through the station would have been wooden body Tates, as well as Harris's and Hitachis. Diagram. I do have to preface this. The lines which I have labelled down Dandenong, up Orbost, etc. aren't named there on the signalling diagram. They are names which I have given them, so they're more easily identifiable. I'll separate Dandenong into roughly 3 areas: the passenger platforms, main Dandenong yards, and Dandenong stockyards. This is Dandenong's diagram in 1979. And looking at this and the modern day signalling diagrams side by side, the signalmen have a far easier job. Although the new Dandenong Signal Control Center / box now controls the whole Pakenham and Cranbourne corridor, so maybe not as easy. The former signal box in 1979 was located right at the southern end of platforms 1 and 2. Speaking of signals, Dandenong was once controlled using 3-position upper quadrant electronic semaphores. North is somewhere this way, but the entire signalling diagram has been rotated so that the Gippsland line is 90 degrees horizontal. From the 1890s until 1960, Dandenong also featured a turntable and engine shed. This layout of the engine servicing facilities were ripped from the 1929 diagram, when they were at their greatest. The turntable was out of use in 1960, and the last of the sidings were removed in 1969. The locomotive facilities would have been located around where this car park is now. The entire facility was gauged at the Victorian standard 5-foot 3-inch broad gauge, and it still is today. Some of the yard limits and all running lines were electrified to 1500 volt DC overhead, although the signaling diagram I used as reference didn't specify which tracks were electrified and which weren't, so I had to piece this diagram together through images. Although I am certain that roads 4 and 5 were electrified, as well as all running lines, and siding C, D, and E. Now, let's break down Dandneong Junction. Passenger. In 1979, suburban services were extended to Pakenham 4 years prior. All running lines and platforms were electrified and bidirectional. This meant all passenger trains could use any platform, although certain trains usually ran off certain platforms. With all the crossovers in and around the station, any train could use any track through the station, not just passenger trains. Another benefit of all tracks through the station being bidirectional is that any train on any platform could also terminate and reverse back in the direction they came. For example, a Pakenham train came in on platform 3 and reversed out on the down Orbost. When trains aren't being terminated, the usual route for trains goes as follows. A down Gippsland/Pakenham train would come in on the down Dandenong, stop at platform 3 and depart on the down Orbost. There were 2 passenger services to South Gippsland, a long distance service to Yarram and a shuttle to Leongatha. The Yarram service ran in from Southern Cross on the down line, stopping at platform 3, but then crossing onto road 2, before junctioning off and heading onto the single track South Gippsland line. I'm not too sure whether this is true or not, but I believe the Leongatha shuttle would have run in on road 2 and into platform 2, where it would then reverse back out again. Up trains from Gippsland, Yarram, and Pakenham usually used platform 3, although keep in mind any train could use any platform, so it was possible for other patterns throughout the day, as well as last minute platform changes due to delays. Passengers trains could also just bypass the platforms entirely on road 4, although I'm pretty sure this would have never happened. Standard goods. Now for the interesting part of this diagram. In 1979, Dandenong once had enormous massive goods sidings, stockyards, and stabling sidings. Dandenong would be the marshalling and interchange point for freight going in and out of the southeastern region, as well as the unloading point for goods being transposed onto the road. Some commodities which would have passed through or been unloaded at Dandenong would have been timber from East Gippsland, which would have been pretty much finished by the time this diagram was drawn, components for the General Motors car factory, thousands of tons of brown coal briquettes from the mines out in the Latrobe Valley, might be making a video on soon, livestock, mainly pigs, but also lamb, cattle and horses, concrete and general goods to many of the regional towns in Gippsland. Most of the freight into Gippsland was electrified using E and L class locomotives. These goods trains could only arrive and depart from roads 4 to 6, although only up trains could have accessed road 6. These trains were limited as these 3 were the only electrified goods sidings. Since it's a goods yard, the sidings don't really have a designated direction, although the yard was divided into, relatively speaking, 2 halves, half for down traffic and half for up traffic. Down traffic was sidings 4 and 5, which could have been accessed by any train of any type. The rest of the sidings were for up trains, notably including the goods shed, which was used to unload and store goods, to either be transported elsewhere via road, for goods to be used at Dandenong, or to be shifted onto a different train. A general goods to Gippsland comes in on the down Dandenong, goes over 1 or 2 single slips, depending on the siding they go into, and then onto the down Orbost once their train is shunted. A general goods to South Gippsland takes the same route into Dandenong. However, there were now 2 options, either take the same way out as the Gippsland goods, or take the double slip onto road 2. The preferred option is to leave via the double slip, as you can simultaneously enter a train into road 3 as the general goods leaves. A general goods bound for Melbourne comes in on road 2, crosses the double slip, and then can access any siding, leaving through this line of double and single slips. If the goods were hauled by an electric engine, then road 4 would be the preferred option, as it blocks the least yard workings. It's also worth mentioning that in 1929, up trains could also access a lot more sidings than they could in 1979. Stockyard goods. For those who don't know, a stockyard is short for livestock yard, and is basically many large pens where livestock is received, kept temporarily, sorted and eventually sold. Since Dandenong was the gateway to Gippsland, where a lot of livestock, mainly sheep and cattle farming, takes place, it's not a surprise that Dandenong was home to a large stockyard with direct rail access. Now, I've ignored this side of the diagram until now, but this is where the stockyards were. From what I can infer and what the helpful people on Facebook tried helping me with, is that siding N was the unloading and loading siding, as it was the only siding with a platform leading to the stockyards. Once the train is unloaded, it would be pulled into siding B, and the empty vans would later be kept in sidings M or L. These sidings also carry the same letters as the L and M vans, the wagons which were purpose-built for hauling sheep and cattle. I'm not sure whether this was intentional or not. Siding B could also be used to store livestock vans until their next train. However, it was usually used as a shunting neck. Once the vans were unloaded, then the livestock vans could be tacked onto a mixed train in main Dandenong yards or immediately be sent out. If it's to depart towards the city, then it would be shunted onto siding A, and if headed towards Gippsland, then the train is also shunted onto siding A, however, just sent the other way. Although this wasn't always the case. Livestock vans don't always have to be remarshalled and stored in sidings L, M, and B. They could also use main Dandenong yards if the sidings are full or the next train out is too long. Livestock wagons could also be dragged over to main Dandenong yards and be built up into longer trains over there. Although the stockyards mainly had sheep, cattle, and horses come in via rail, the yards had pigs as well, and that's where this unnamed siding under siding B comes in. This was the Gippsland Cooperative Bacon Curing siding, and many of the pig trains that came into Dandenong yards had a much more tasty fate than just being stored and then shipped off. That was pretty much the only purpose of this offshoot of Road 10, to bypass the stockyard workings and allow bacon trains direct access. Shunting and sidings. Most of the shunts and marshalling performed at Dandenong wasn't actually done by the locomotives hauling the trains. It was performed by a station pilot. And for those who don't know what a station pilot is, it was a locomotive specifically designated to a specific area, in this case Dandenong, who would do all the shunting, some short trains around the Dandenong area, and other odd jobs. So if wagons needed to be shunted onto another train, the pilot engine would be the one doing it. And this would be the explanation for a lot of the other random sidings, such as siding P, which was mainly a shunting neck. When a train arrived into Dandenong Yard, if a large section of the train needed to be shunted into a different siding and the length of the section exceeded the junction, then the train would be sent into siding P rather than going onto the main line. Siding P could also be used to stable locos while their trains were being shunted, but that duty was usually executed by siding F, or the locos would just be kept at the front of the train. These three sidings up here at the north, sidings C, D, and E, were used to stable suburban trains, with D and E able to stable one 6-car set each, and siding C able to stable a staggering 2 6-car suburban trains and 1 3-car train. I'm not actually too sure why siding C is so much longer than the others, but in 1929, there was a second siding parallel to siding C, and I suspect the reason might have been the shunting of brown coal trains at the State Electricity Commission siding. The final 2 sidings have completely stumped me. These 2 sidings off of Road 9 and 10 respectively. I see no reason for them being there besides perhaps an extra place to store empty wagons. If there's anyone in the comments who knows what these 2 were used for, your expertise is greatly appreciated. How much is left? So how much of Dandenong is actually left today? Well, pretty much nothing. Dandenong still has 3 running lines and platforms. You'll see the most obvious difference is that all of the goods yard has been removed, with the only trace of there ever being a goods yard here being this maintenance siding, which was once part of Road 4, although the set of points where it connected to Road 3 has been pushed in and it has since become a dead end. The other signs a goods yard was here is the large empty space where multiple sidings were, although the maintenance siding was only reinstated after 2018. Before that, the remnants of Roads 4, 5, and 6 were still present. You'll also have noticed that all the lines have been renamed since the 1970s, with the running lines being flipped to match the platforms that run along them, which wouldn't have been possible with the goods yard. Just like the goods yard, the stockyards are also nearly gone. Sidings A, B, and Bacon still exist today, although with a slightly different purpose. Siding B and Bacon are now called Siding 1 and 2 respectively, although Siding B was put out of use in 1994, so it might be an entirely different siding, or it was reactivated. Today, they're also used to stable suburban trains, just like Siding C, D, and E. Siding A until 2018 was still called Siding A, somehow escaping renaming. After the stockyards were removed, siding A was no longer required to be a through siding and was cut back, but in 2022 it was joined back up to the up Dandenong and made a running line. It now carries all up trains from platform 3, although this came at a cost of losing its name. The original suburban stabling sidings have not changed in purpose. Siding D was removed, however E and C are still used for stabling suburban trains, with siding C remaining relatively the same length, only being shortened by about 10 meters, and siding E getting an extension of about 190 meters. You'll notice that not every train can access every platform now, and the station no longer features any double or single slips. The triple track now extends all the way down to the junction at Cranbourne, which was most likely built off of the former alignment of siding P. Much of the goods traffic that passed through the station was also seized. Until 2022, cement trains still ran to Kimberley Clark. Timber trains ceased in the 1980s, when the Orbost line closed, as well as road transport becoming quicker and more affordable. Livestock trains also ceased in the 1980s, with the road playing a major role, as well as livestock no longer being permitted to be transported by rail. Bucket traffic was also slowly being phased out in the 70s, and by 1979, bucket traffic would have been nearly unheard of. The only goods train to pass through the station today is the Maryvale paper train. Passenger services to Gippsland aren't electric anymore, with the final part of mainline electrification removed in 2001. The Yarram line was truncated substantially to now be a suburban line known as the Cranbourne line. However, the government did have the decency to duplicate it nearly 25 years after its reopening. Dandenong was once an important railway station, the gateway to Gippsland, playing one of the most important roles when it came to Gippsland railway traffic. However, it's not like Dandenong is useless today. It's constantly making it into the top 20 for yearly passenger patronage, so it clearly isn't useless from a passenger point of view. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have any other diagram suggestions, leave them in the comments below. If not, like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.